with the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice. It is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Coming up, we will have half an hour of business news and analysis. On today's show, the U.S. new artificial intelligence export control rules. How might it impact global supply chains in chip industry? And the U.S. TikTok users flock to another Chinese social media app, the RedNote, over the potential TikTok ban. And now let's begin with our top story. The Commerce Ministry says China firmly opposes the Biden administration's restrictions on exports related to artificial intelligence. A ministry spokesperson said the restrictions tighten export control on AI chips while expanding long-arm jurisdiction. The spokesperson said the restrictions create obstacles and interference for third parties engaged in regular trade with China. Meanwhile, the U.S. chip giant NVIDIA said the Biden administration's new rules would only weaken America's global competitiveness and undermine the innovation. So for more on this, join us on the line now are Professor Qu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, Andy Mark, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. So I will start with you. The Biden administration has issued new restrictions on the export of U.S.-developed chips that power AI systems. Tell us more about this policy measures and what are the biggest changes and what's the purpose of it?
Right. I think the purpose of this, of course, is to double down on the semiconductor chip export ban to China. If you remember, this sort of the ban of the chips was already launched back in 2022. And so this is a way now, I think, it really trying to close some of the loopholes. So what this new kind of policy is that it basically looks at 120 countries, and out of them they picked out 18, which are the really close allies of the United States, and these 18 countries have unlimited access to the chip exports from the United States, and then there are, including China, Russia, North Korea, of course, and Iran. They are basically on the restricted list. So these countries don't have, or regions do not have the access to some of these GPUs, the graphic processing units, the chips that are used to power AI. And then in the middle of all these countries, some of them actually are really still close allies of the United States. Countries like Portugal, India, Mexico, UAE, Israel, Saudi Arabia, all these countries, and Switzerland, they are in some ways restricted. They can purchase up to 50,000 GPUs per country per year. There's some sort of other clauses. For example, if they have the government-to-government deals, that could bump up their chip purchase up to 100,000. But in any case, this I think is again a way to contain China's access to these advanced chips to power AI developments, and is another way to contain China's technological advancements. But they're doing it in a much broader sort of in scope. And definitely that creates a lot of concerns of the industries and so on. And also, I think these airlines that they are worried about, the restricted access to the U.S. chips, but also in terms of their AI training centers and so on and so forth. So the impact will be wide-ranging. That said, this will come into effect in 120 days. So it still really remains to be seen what the new Trump administration is going to do with regard to this particular policy.
And so, Andy, as Yan mentioned, it seems that the GPUs are one of the key products that the U.S. government wants to limit. So tell us more about this GPU and why the U.S. targets on this area.
Well, Zhao Yang, if we look at it from the perspective of artificial intelligence, which many analysts, many government officials believe that whichever country can come to dominate, if such dominance is possible, can dominate artificial intelligence, that will give them such an advantage over other countries that to lose this race would appear to be unthinkable. So there's three components then in order to win this race. There's hardware, there's data, and then there's algorithms. And so the U.S. leads, of course, in the hardware, primarily the advanced semiconductor chips used to run the algorithms on the data that give us things like large language models, increasingly other types of artificial intelligence that, again, may transform the world. And so I think the U.S. sees this as the last possible chance to slow China down, which is why I think it is making all of these efforts. And it's important to recognize here, too, I think Yen did an excellent job of outlining the details of this new approach or this escalation, I would say. But I see two areas of risk. The first is to companies like NVIDIA. So Jensen Huang has been saying publicly, which is quite unusual for the CEO of a major American company, to be so openly criticizing U.S. government policy about the impact this could have not only on NVIDIA, but the global competitiveness of the entire U.S. semiconductor industry. So I think that's the first point. That's a risk. And we've seen this kind of unintended consequence with the attacks against Huawei. The second area of risk I see is with American allies. So even the closest ones, I think, are feeling unease and concern about these policies. And you look at countries like the UAE, which has a very ambitious, and I would say from my interactions with UAE government officials, a very credible strategy for being an influential player in this new age of AI. And of course, this creates greater difficulties and hurdles for countries like the UAE. So I see that the two risks being the risk to American companies and the risk to countries that historically have been close to the U.S. and now may have cause to really rethink their alignment.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so they divided 3 tiers of countries for exports of the advanced AI chips and technology. What's the purpose, and how might the rules influence the chip industry among U.S. allies which are not included on the non-restriction list?
Well, I think they've been divided into 3 tiers. Actually, I think it's more like very childish operation. They define who is their really best friend. BFF, 18 of them, Japan, like Belgium, like Germany, the names, and the others are like the middle ground, like Malaysia, like Singapore, Vietnam. You see, and China, Iran, and Russia are the tier 3, which means they probably have the highest restriction. America wants to use this restriction and so-called anti-proliferation of AI to prevent China to getting, very high-tech AI and the GPU, and also to protect America's monopoly power in this area, NVIDIA, for example. But actually, you take a look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA is the number 1 company stand out, and again, the fight against this, this restriction. Go to their website of NVIDIA. You will see the Jensen Huang made a very, very harsh comment and announcement towards Biden's policy to say this is undermining American companies' profit and their leading position in this area. The reason why I think it's very, very clear is because by all this, because China is the largest buyer in the market of the NVIDIA and the GPU. So by this announcement and the restriction alone, NVIDIA are looking at 15 to 20 billion US dollar loss in next year, and just 1 year alone. And we're looking at many, many years to come. And also, secondly, NVIDIA are trying to sell what we call the sovereign AI infrastructure to every country, which means every nation should buy a share of NVIDIA product to build their own AI infrastructure. I think this is a good business thinking, but Biden smashed that dream to the ground. And this is not going to happen. So the other nation, in contrast, have to build their own infrastructure. For example, in China right now, we have found many replacement. Number one, we have already getting very, very ample inventory prepared for that situation. If we take a look at China's preparation, we have already, we know that CUDA ecology is perfect. We know that A100 is probably the top-notch hardware, but we have already got our own replacement. We have the PyTorch ecology. We have our Mind, Spore whole system by Huawei, and also we're trying to do our own hardware. For example, we get the Morse Red. We have Huawei hardware. So all these are building good for use kind of hardware plus software ecology already. So which means we have already been surviving. The only problem is that how can we survive better or even catch up or go beyond American, standard and, quality. So it forces China to grow, actually. Instead of beating China and helping NVIDIA, actually, they're beating NVIDIA and helping China. So that is the yin and yang. I think Biden really need to learn something about the I Ching and old Chinese philosophy.
So, yeah, NVIDIA said this would harm the America's global competitiveness. So how do you view it?
Right. I think, as Andy said, this is quite unusual. We know that Jason Wang has been a very kind of careful, right, entrepreneur. So this is quite uncommon for him to speak out and so critical about this policy. And I think he's right. According to the company's filings, they made $5.4 billion in China just in the third quarter of last year. So as I think Professor Qi Tiang also mentioned, this tens of billions of dollars of revenues could be at jeopardy if this very complicated rules are going to be applied. But again, there is 120 days of comment periods, and the Trump administration could really go either way. This is also quite complicated. I think, many of the industrial experts also said this document really lacks the clarity, right? Whether or not these are the chips that are really built only for AI or designed for AI, because there are many different kinds of chips that could or may not, right, be under the restrictions. So, for example, some of the chips are made for the gaming purposes, but they do have the AI capabilities. So are these chips also under the kinds of category? So there's a lot of uncertainty, I would say, on the industry's perspective. The document is 128 pages. So even if it's go into effect, it's going to take many lawyers to figure out exactly how to comply with this kind of, export ban. So NVIDIA's stock slided by only just 2% in face of this news. So again, one way to think about this is, this is the $3 trillion market value company. So 2% slide is pretty significant as far as the company value and also the stock value is. As we know, the U.S. stock market is booming, but it's largely driven by some of these, AI and chip technologies and companies. And so that's not a small, insignificant, I think, impact on the stock market. But on the other hand, I think it's only a 2% of slide. That kind of indicates that the industry thinks there's probably still a very large room for maneuver. But I think, Jason Wang's concern is rightly justified. Not only it will affect the company's bottom lines when it comes to revenues, but more importantly, I think, once some of these countries outside of the 18 countries, they would need to look for alternatives, right? So where do they buy chips if they can't buy from AMD or, NVIDIA? They may look to Huawei. They may look at, the Chinese alternatives. So I think the worry is that this is going to create, new market opportunities for the Chinese-based AI chips companies. And so that could create, formidable competition down the road. And last but not the least, I think, in China, a lot of these technologies, when it comes to AI, for example, a lot of our open source models. And so I think this kinds of ban, right, restrictions are definitely not conducive to the kinds of technological cooperation and sharing, which I think is really important when it comes to technological advancements. So I believe Jason Wang's concerns are rightly justified.
And so Andy, so how do you think might this rule affect the global industrial chains in the chip industry? And as Ian mentioned, there may be opportunities for Chinese enterprises. What do you think about that?
I think there's certainly long-term opportunities for Chinese companies to fill this gap because, if we look back at the history of technology, especially on the enterprise side, what companies hate is risk and uncertainty. So what Microsoft did back in the day was they would foster what they called FUD, F-U-D, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And this is enormously disruptive to supply chains because if you're not sure a particular supplier can deliver on time and on budget, this is tremendously risky that many companies want to avoid this pretty much at all costs. So I think what these regulations are doing is that they're exactly adding fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that the victims of this will be the NVIDIAs. And in the short term, of course, there are no good substitutes. But what this does is it really galvanizes other companies, especially some Chinese ones, to fill the gap. So yeah, I don't think this is good for global supply chains when we're looking at semiconductors or the AI value chain as well. Mark Zuckerberg made a very interesting comment the other day in that it's not just the hardware. China is also advancing on the algorithms. So a Chinese company was able to replicate the performance of ChatGPT-4 with about 1/10 of the processing power. And I believe they were using the NVIDIA China chips, not the global ones. So, again, I think there's a lot of moving parts here. And these policies really just increase the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is bad for global supply chains.
I just wanted to add to what Andy just mentioned. I do think that it makes sense for, some of the other mitigation sort of the strategies, right? So like Tencent, they were able to really improve their software, right? Their Hunyuan software. And so they're able to really improve their AI models using really dumbed down kind of chips. It's H20, right? Which is really a dumbed down version of their H100 now is really the most recent cutting edge GPU. So I agree, right? With the improvements on algorithm and the software, it can overcome some of the hardware constraints.
Well, we're speaking with Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University, Andy Mark, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and also Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China. And after a short break, China's RedNote tops the U.S. App Store as American users worry about a potential TikTok ban. Stay with us.
Welcome. I'm Elaf Elad, economics professor and member of the Data Science and AI Center at New York University, Shanghai. On the World Today program, you can find in-depth and impartial insight, as well as critical commentary on key trends in the Chinese economy, financial technology, business, and blockchain. To prepare for the world tomorrow, join me on World Today.
Hello, I am Dr. Digby James Wren, a political analyst and international relations scholar specializing in China area studies. World Today offers unmatched in-depth perspectives on China's politics, economics, business, technology, and society. World Today's team of reporters and contributors provides valuable information from all of the world's major economies. I hope you can join me on World Today for the very best insights and news from China, on China, and help to build a better understanding of China's role in the world today.
You're listening to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Chinese social media app RedNote or Xiaohongshu has claimed the top spot on Apple's App Store in the United States. Media reports say the impending TikTok ban in the U.S. has unexpectedly boosted the popularity of the Chinese lifestyle app. On RedNote, hashtags like TikTok ban and TikTok refugee are gaining traction, with many US-based creators sharing their experiences of migrating from TikTok. So Yan, the US TikTok users are flocking to the RedNote or Xiaohongshu over the potential TikTok ban. So how do you explain this phenomenon and why is this happening?
Right. So I think the reason that this is happening is, again, this is a very popular, social media platform, like TikTok. And so the ban is really, kind of against a lot of these public interests, right? A lot of the people, especially young people, they love to be on TikTok, and there are many small businesses also doing their businesses on TikTok. So the ban is kind of, in a way, backfired because all these users, they are just trying to find an alternative. And I think also that speaks to several things. One is that, this Chinese social media platform, they really have more advanced and better algorithm that really beat some of these US counterparts. And that's why it's so attractive for people to try to stick to it or, look for alternative when this is banned. And it's interesting today in my class, I teach at a liberal arts college. I actually asked my students, do they use TikTok and how do they feel? And a couple of students actually told me they're really sad because this is banned. They're going to have to, say bye to some of their really good buddies on this social media app. So I think the reaction is quite interesting, and people are looking for the RedNote, and they're looking for different place where they can reconnect. And so I think that just shows that all these kind of legislations, they're really kind of against the public interest, and so people will look for alternatives. And this kind of ban would, I think, simply backfire.
So Qiqiang, so tell us more about this RedNote or Xiaohongshu. Why are the American TikTok creators switching to it?
Well, if you want to know the real reason, I think it's very simple. Number one, everybody knows about TikTok ban. And secondly, for Little Red, they are one of the most successful commercialized social network. So what we're saying is the monetization effect for that, Little Red is actually very, very good. So which means that a lot of influencers and vloggers are trying to stream live, selling all kinds of stuff, and the feedback are very, very positive. And also, I think on the Little Red Book or Little Red Note, they are very friendly towards international stuff.
So, Andy, talking about the potential TikTok ban, the U.S. government has claimed that TikTok poses a national security threat, while many users believe that the law violates the free speech and is unconstitutional. So what are your thoughts on that? And with Donald Trump returning to the White House soon, what can we expect from him regarding the TikTok?
Well, I think these are critical days for TikTok. So I think, while the ban may actually go into effect on the 19th, given TikTok's, again, very sophisticated, savvy strategy in the U.S., I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way either through an executive order by President Trump or some other means to continue operating. And I think one of the great things about TikTok in the U.S. was when they started, it was very easy to build an audience and make money. So, this is a great thing to offer Americans. And the last thing I would say about this is in this flood of so-called TikTok refugees to Xiaohongshu or RedNote or whatever you want to call it, there's a halo effect. Many, many young people in China in the United States have a very positive view of Chinese apps, and I would say indirectly of China. And Nancy Pelosi surprisingly made this statement a year or so ago that no one paid much attention to, but she said if we ban TikTok, we will lose this younger generation. The Democratic Party would lose the youth vote for an entire generation. And I think this is exactly what is playing out.
And yeah, so what do you think about the potential TikTok ban? And with Donald Trump returning to the White House soon, what can we expect from him regarding TikTok?
Right. I think that is a very interesting question. We know the rule is from the Supreme Court. And so whether or not Trump, I hope, Andy's right, that, he really means what he says when he said he has a soft spot in his heart for TikTok. And maybe he will be able to use some of his executive power to rescind the ban or do something else to essentially, bring back the TikTok users in the United States. But we all know, it's really just a pretext, right? That has to do with TikTok's data, even though we all know that TikTok's primary data center actually are located in the United States. It's in the Northern Virginia and also Hillsboro, Oregon, which is, a couple miles away from me. And they also store data in Singapore. So there's really no sort of a data security issue that they worry that somehow the data can be, accessible to the Chinese government. And they're making exactly the same kind of argument now, banning some of the components of the EVs either to be imported or even manufactured within the United States if there is any Chinese involvement in it. So it's quite clear this is, using national security as a pretext. But I also think that there are some business interests behind, of course. TikTok is a tremendously successful social media platform. And if, X or other companies are able to get a share of it or even, updating the algorithm, this is going to be dream come true for many of these, business people. But I don't think this is going to happen. So we'll see what's going to happen next. But I agree with Andy. I think there are some really interesting, important political implications when you're against these young people's will and ban and really outrightly, violate the kinds of free speech, stipulations in the Constitution. But still, I think other than the monetary interest, I think these young people really have the incentives and have the, the desire to kind of really connect, right, with people, with each other within and outside of the country. So other than, making money, I do know that these days, a lot of the TikTok refugees, when they get onto the RedNote, they're showing pictures of their cats as a way sort of to introduce themselves. But also I know, the Chinese kids are asking for help on their English homework and, the American kids are asking help on their math homework. So it's quite interesting. These young generations, they find ways to communicate to a very different country, different people, different cultures. So we'll see what's going to happen next.
Well, we're speaking with Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, and also Andy Mark, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. And that's all the time we have for this edition of Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.